It's fascinating, isn't it? We make so many financial decisions like all the time.
Uh,
And yet the reasons why we pick one thing over another, well, they can be surprisingly murky.
totally.
You sent over this really great set of materials, perfect for someone like you who really values getting to the bottom of things quickly.
Yeah.
And it dives right into these hidden forces
Mm.
that kind of shape our money habits, often without us even, realizing it.
Absolutely. What we're really exploring here is behavioral finance.
Right.
Think of it like where psychology meets economics. It shines a light on the ways we actually handle money, which, let's be honest, aren't always rational.
Definitely not.
And the sources we're looking at today are super rich. They go from like core academic stuff on biases, anchoring, availability, heuristic, all the way to really practical, hands-on advice for building better habits, and even chats from online communities, people talking about how they manage spending urges day to day.
Right. So this isn't just abstract theory. Not at all.
No, no.
It's about understanding the real world things that are always pushing and pulling us.
Exactly.
And that's really our goal today, right? To pull out the most useful, actionable stuff from all this.
Yep.
We want to help everyone listening get a clearer picture of why they might make certain money choices and maybe become a bit more aware of those subtle influences.
Sort of a shortcut to being more financially aware, more resilient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Without getting bogged down in like super complex jargon. So where should we start? There's so much here.
I think a great place to begin is the anchoring effect. It's just amazing how one piece of information, sometimes totally irrelevant, can just like grab hold of our judgment.
Okay, yeah, let's dig into anchoring. My understanding from the sources is it's this mental quirk where our brain kind of latches onto the first bit of info that gets the anchor.
Uh-huh.
And even if that anchor doesn't really matter for the decision, it still heavily influences what we think next.
Right.
That example of the car really stood out to me. You see a decent car next to a super expensive one,
Yeah, I remember that one.
and suddenly the first car looks like a steal, even if it's still, a lot of money on its own.
Yeah.
It's all about that first high price you saw. Have you noticed that yourself?
Oh, constantly. And sellers use this all the time in pricing, don't they?
For sure.
You see, those was $100, now $60 tags everywhere. That $100, that's the anchor. It makes the $60 feel way better than if you just saw $60 cold.
Totally.
And it's wild, even in like negotiations, the very first offer thrown out can just set the whole tone, the whole range for the rest of the talk.
It's like our brain just gets nudged by that first number, huh? But can we fight it? Like, how do we stop falling into that trap?
Well, the research seems to say that really thinking about it helps, like actively questioning if that first number, that anchor, is even relevant.
Okay.
And really looking at the decision itself on its own merits. That makes you less likely to be swayed. It's about consciously using that more thoughtful part of your brain.
Instead of just going with the flow based on that first number?
Exactly. So here's a question for you and for everyone listening. Have you ever caught yourself thinking a sale price was fantastic just because it was way lower than some original price you saw,
Oh, yeah.
without maybe stopping to think if the sale price itself is actually, a good deal for you?
Definitely guilty.
Uh-huh.
Especially online shopping. It's so easy. So, okay, that's anchoring. Let's move on to another really interesting one. The availability heuristic.
Ah, yes.
This is about how easily examples pop into our heads, right?
Yeah.
And how that affects our judgment.
Precisely. We tend to figure out how likely something is or how common it is
Right,
based purely on how easy it is to remember an example of it.
right.
And things that are really vivid or happened recently or got us emotional, those stick in our memory much better.
Okay, so if you see tons of dramatic news about, say, plane crashes, even though flying is statistically super safe,
Mm-hmm.
you might start feeling like plane crashes are way more common than they really are.
Yeah,
Because those dramatic images are so easy to recall.
exactly that. The sources mention how media focus on violent crime can sometimes warp our perception of overall crime rates.
Right. It's not that crime isn't an issue, but the constant spotlight can make it feel like it's happening more often or is more widespread than the stats might show.
Precisely. Because those vivid examples are just so easily retrieved, so available in our minds, they can distort how we see reality. And this doesn't just affect how we see the world, it really hits our financial judgments too.
How does that work in finance? Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about a recent stock market dip that gets tons of headlines.
Okay.
Even if fundamentally the long-term picture is okay, just the ease of remembering all those scary headlines might make us overestimate the chance of more losses.
And then maybe make a rash move like selling everything.
Exactly. Or maybe a friend had a really bad experience with a specific type of investment. That story sticks with you, right? It's
Yeah,
readily available, so it might influence your choices way more than it should, even if your situation is totally different.
that makes sense.
So, can you think of a time, maybe recently, when a big news story or something memorable, maybe something that happened to a friend, kind of skewed your view of a financial risk? Or an opportunity, maybe more than the actual facts warranted?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I can definitely think of times a scary headline made me way more anxious about my investments than probably I needed to be.
Uh-huh.
It's a good reminder to like look beyond the stuff that grabs your attention immediately.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've got anchoring, availability. What's another key psychological thing influencing our money decisions?
Another really crucial one is hyperbolic discounting. This is all about how we value rewards based on when we get them.
Okay, this sounds like the classic I want it now problem, right?
Yeah.
We prioritize getting something immediately over waiting for something bigger and better later.
That's exactly it. Hyperbolic discounting is basically our tendency to put this like unreasonably high value on immediate rewards.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, we really undervalue future benefits, even if they're not that far off. This whole now versus later conflict is a huge driver of our financial choices.
Yeah, like buying that cool gadget right now just feels so much more appealing than the abstract idea of having more retirement savings in like 30 years.
Totally.
Our present self just seems to shout louder than our future self. It's a constant struggle, isn't it? Does it ever feel like that immediate desire just completely steamrolls your long-term goals? I feel like most people can probably relate to that.
It's a very, very human thing. And it ties directly into self-control, which we'll get to in a bit.
Okay.
But before we do, let's touch on scarcity. How just feeling like you don't have enough can really mess with your financial thinking.
Scarcity. Yeah, that makes me think immediately of being short on cash, like living paycheck to paycheck. How does that feeling impact how we think about money?
Well, the research is pretty clear. When we're intensely focused on a lack of something, could be money, could be time, even social connection, it can narrow our focus so much
Hmm.
that it actually impairs our cognitive abilities,
Mhm.
including our ability to make good financial decisions. It makes tough choices even tougher.
Wow. So if someone's constantly stressed about paying the bills, that stress itself can make it harder for them to plan effectively for the long term. That's really important and kind of counterintuitive.
Exactly. That feeling of scarcity creates this sort of tunnel vision. Your attention gets locked onto the immediate problem, and it becomes really hard to step back, plan ahead, or even see other options.
Right.
It gives us a really important way to understand how poverty itself can affect decision making. That constant feeling of scarcity is a cognitive load.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Now, what about confirmation bias? That sounds like something we all probably do.
Oh, absolutely. Confirmation bias is basically our tendency to seek out, favor, and remember information that confirms what we already believe.
Mhm.
And at the same time, we tend to ignore, dismiss, or downplay anything that contradicts our existing views. It's like we're lawyers building a case for our own side.
Yeah, like if I'm convinced a certain stock is going to skyrocket,
Right.
I might only read articles singing its praises and just brush off any analyst warnings as like, oh, they just don't get it.
Exactly. And the research shows this happens in a few ways. We might actively look for sources that agree with us. That's bias search.
Okay.
We might interpret wishy-washy information in a way that fits our view, biased interpretation. And we even tend to remember the evidence that supports us better than the stuff that challenges us, that's biased recall.
Wow, it works on multiple levels then.
It really does. One study found people with strong beliefs actually remembered ambiguous evidence as supporting their belief later on. It's this powerful drive to confirm what we think we know.
And the sources mentioned social media makes this worse, right? With filter bubbles.
Oh, totally. Filter bubbles and personalized feeds amplify this hugely. We end up mainly seeing stuff we're already likely to agree with.
Creates those echo chambers where our beliefs just get stronger and stronger, even if they're not based on the full picture. So how does this mess us up in finance, specifically? Investing.
Well, an investor might hunt for news that confirms their decision to buy a certain stock, right?
Yeah.
And they might just tune out, consciously or not, any warnings or negative signs. This can lead to holding on to losers way too long because admitting the loss would mean admitting they were wrong.
Ouch.
Or they might miss huge risks because they're only looking for the confirming stuff. Have you ever noticed yourself doing that? Like only clicking on headlines that back up a money decision you already made? It feels good to be right, doesn't it?
Ah, yeah, definitely felt that pull.
Yeah,
It really takes a conscious effort to seek out stuff that disagrees with you and really weigh it fairly.
it absolutely does.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about loss aversion. This feels like a really powerful emotional driver.
Yes, loss aversion is huge. Basically, it means the pain of losing something feels much, much worse than the pleasure of gaining the exact same amount feels good.
Right, so losing $100 just stings way more than finding $100 feels great.
Right.
It's not symmetrical emotionally.
Exactly. The research consistently shows this asymmetry, and it means we're often way more motivated to avoid losing something than we are to gain something of equal value.
And that can lead to some weird financial behavior, I guess.
Definitely. Like maybe holding on to a stock that's tanking because selling it means locking in the loss, which feels awful.
Right. Even if selling and putting the money elsewhere is clearly the smarter move.
That's a classic example. It can make us too cautious sometimes, afraid to take reasonable risks that could pay off. But paradoxically, it can also make us take bigger risks if we're already in the hole and trying desperately to get back to even.
Huh, interesting. But the sources also said understanding this could be used positively, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like framing goals, instead of just talking about the gains of saving for retirement, you could frame it as avoiding the loss of financial security later on. For some people, that avoiding loss angle is way more motivating.
Okay, tapping into that aversion.
Right. Or even visually showing progress on a goal as moving from red to black. That taps into our dislike of being in the red, being in a loss position.
Makes sense. So thinking about your own wiring, what motivates you more? The fear of missing out on gains, FOMO, or the actual fear of losing money, losing security?
It's interesting to ponder which one hits harder for you,
It
personally.
really is.
Okay, now the sources also mention some slightly more subtle things about how we perceive value, like the labor illusion and the pain of payment. Can you unpack those?
Sure. The labor illusion is basically our tendency to value something more if we see the effort that went into it,
Okay.
even if the actual outcome or quality isn't necessarily better because of that visible effort.
So, like, if my financial advisor gives me this super detailed report showing all the steps they took,
Yeah.
even if the final plan is the same as one presented more simply, I might feel like I got more value because I saw the work. Exactly. Seeing the effort can boost our appreciation. Think about restaurants with open kitchens. Seeing the chef's hustle can kind of make the food taste better.
Yeah, maybe.
Similarly, knowing the work behind managing investments or doing taxes can increase satisfaction, even if the service was technically free in some way.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
We connect effort with value. And what about the pain of payment? That sounds pretty self-explanatory, but what's the nuance?
Well, it's the negative feeling we get when we actually part with our money.
Uh-huh.
And the key thing is, the more tangible and obvious the payment method, the more painful it feels. And the more painful it feels, the less likely we might be to spend.
Okay, so pulling out actual cash and handing it over feels worse psychologically
More salient, yeah.
than just tapping a card or clicking buy online.
Precisely. With cash, it's physical, it's immediate, you see it leave your hand. With cards or Apple Pay or whatever, it feels more abstract, more removed from the actual depletion of your funds.
Right.
That lower pain can definitely lead to more impulsive spending. It's just so frictionless to click confirm purchase online without really feeling the money go.
For sure. That convenience is a double-edged sword. Okay, let's switch gears slightly to a social dynamic. Reciprocity. What's that about?
Reciprocity is this really fundamental social rule. Basically, we feel obligated to return a favor or a positive action we've received.
So if someone does something nice for me, I feel this internal pressure to do something nice back.
Exactly. It's a powerful force in how we interact, and it definitely plays out in financial relationships, too.
How so? Like if my advisor always goes the extra mile, maybe sends helpful articles or checks in,
Yeah.
I might feel more loyal, more likely to stick with them, maybe even recommend them because of that sense of reciprocity.
That's a perfect example. Building that positive relationship, providing value beyond just the transaction, taps into that principle. It creates a sense of mutual obligation and strengthens the bond. It's not just about the money changing hands.
It's about that human connection and trust. Okay, now something that always gets attention. The power of free. Why is free such a magic word?
It really does seem to trigger something unique in our brains. Free isn't just processed as zero cost or very cheap.
Mm.
It often gets assigned this special, almost irrational value.
Uh-huh.
People will often choose a free option, even if a slightly more expensive paid option is objectively better or meets their needs more effectively.
It's like rational thought just goes out the window when free appears.
Yeah.
We focus so much on the zero price that we forget to evaluate quality or fit.
That seems to be a big part of it. The emotional pull of free can be incredibly strong, often overriding a more logical assessment of actual value.
Wild. Okay, so even with understanding all these biases, sticking to financial goals is still hard, right? We all slip up.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to self-control and this idea of pre-commitment. How does committing ahead of time help?
Pre-commitment is basically making decisions now that lock you into a certain course of action later, reducing the chance you'll give in to temptation. The classic example in finance is setting up automatic savings transfers. You decide once to save $6 per paycheck, set it up, and then it just happens.
Right, you take the decision out of your hands each payday.
Exactly. It automates the good behavior. You don't have to rely on willpower every single time. You reduce the opportunity to spend that money impulsively.
It's about making the good choices the easy default choices, almost like putting your savings on autopilot.
Precisely. The less friction, the less conscious effort required for good habits like saving and investing, the higher the chance we'll actually stick with them long term.
Makes sense. Now, building on that idea of awareness and intention, let's talk about financial mindfulness. What does that mean exactly?
Financial mindfulness. Yeah, it's pretty much what it sounds like. Applying those core mindfulness principles, being present, aware, non-judgmental, specifically to your money life.
Okay.
So it means paying full attention to your financial activities, earning, spending, saving, investing, without beating yourself up about it.
Right.
It's about being really conscious of where your money is actually going and making deliberate, thoughtful decisions instead of just acting on impulse or old habits.
So instead of mindlessly swiping the card, it's pausing, thinking, do I really need this? How does this fit my goals? What's the
It's
impact?
exactly that. Bringing that moment-to-moment awareness into your financial world, just like you might practice mindful eating or mindful walking.
Okay. Now, shifting to the very practical stuff, that online community discussion you shared had some great real-world tips for sticking to a budget. What jumped out at you from that?
Yeah, there was some great stuff there. The pay yourself first idea came up a lot.
Yeah, automate savings before anything else.
Right. And using separate savings accounts like virtual buckets for different goals, house down payment, vacation fund.
Uh-huh. That seemed really popular.
Yeah.
Helps visualize progress.
Definitely. And just the basic act of tracking spending. So many people emphasize that. You can't manage it if you don't know where it's going.
So true. What gets measured gets managed. What else stood out?
I liked the idea of having a dedicated splurge or fun money budget.
Yeah, that seems smart. Acknowledges we're human.
Right. It makes the whole budget feel less restrictive, more sustainable if you build in some guilt-free discretionary spending.
Totally. And that simple trick of deleting saved credit card info from websites.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Just adding that tiny bit of friction, having to physically get your card and type it in, can apparently stop a surprising number of impulse buys.
It really can. It breaks the automatic flow.
And using wish lists, too, like putting something you want on a list and waiting a bit.
A cooling off period.
Yeah. Gives you time to decide if you really want it or if it was just a fleeting urge. Have you tried any of those yourself?
Some variations, yeah. They really align with those behavioral principles. Make the good stuff easy, make the tempting stuff harder. That wait to buy strategy is pure genius against hyperbolic discounting.
For sure.
The discussion also mentioned classic stuff like envelope budgeting, using simple apps, just ways to get a clearer handle on things.
Right. Now, switching focus a bit, those financial samurai excerpts gave an interesting take on just the raw appeal of money itself. What did you take from that?
It was really striking how even people with, maybe idealistic or non-material goals still find it hard to ignore the pull of earning more.
Yeah.
Those discussions about the trade-offs like high-paying but super demanding job versus more time or less stress.
Mm-hmm.
It just highlighted how powerful financial incentives are in the choices we make, even when we value other things highly. Money isn't everything, obviously, but man, it influences a lot of decisions.
Definitely underscores that complex relationship we have with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a tool. It's tied up with security, status, maybe even identity.
For sure. Now, we mentioned overconfidence bias earlier, just briefly. How does that show up financially?
Well, the basic idea is thinking we know more or are better at managing money than we actually are,
Mm.
which can lead to underestimating risks, maybe taking on investments that are too speculative, or just not seeking advice when we probably should. That I got this feeling even when maybe we don't.
Exactly. And those other sources, ABN, AMRO, Vanguard, they really hammered home that investing isn't purely logical.
No kidding.
It's so emotional. And like we talked about with loss aversion, that fear of losing can be a much stronger driver than the hope of winning.
It really is an emotional roller coaster, isn't it?
Hmm.
Market ups and downs can trigger some intense
For
feelings.
sure. And Cowrie-Wise brought up greed, too, that excessive desire for more money,
Yeah, just wanting more for the sake of more.
which, if unchecked, can obviously lead to some really poor, potentially harmful financial decisions, often ignoring other important things in life.
Right. Now, broadening out even more, there was that sociological take from Dave Eldervoss about money's social structures. What was the key point there?
It was really about understanding that money's power isn't just inherent in the coins or notes themselves. It comes from our shared social agreements, our norms, our institutions. We all kind of agree to use it as a way to trade, to measure value, to store wealth. It's this collective belief system that makes it work.
So its power is fundamentally social,
Exactly. It's embedded in how our society is structured. And then finally, that self-determinationtheory.org source had a really crucial point about motivation.
which was,
That money, while obviously a motivator, isn't always the best or only motivator, especially for complex creative tasks. Sometimes big financial incentives can even backfire and reduce someone's internal drive to do good work.
oh, that's interesting. So throwing money at a problem doesn't always fix it and might even make intrinsic motivation weaker.
It can, yeah. It's a good reminder that while money matters, it's not the only thing driving us. We have these internal motivators too: purpose, mastery, autonomy.
Right. Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground.
We really have.
So just to quickly recap some of the big psychological players we talked about. Anchoring, availability, hyperbolic discounting, scarcity's impact, confirmation bias, loss aversion.
Yep, all those biases and heuristics that shape our decisions, often without us even noticing.
And the big takeaway seems to be the need for more financial mindfulness.
Exactly, that conscious awareness. Knowing these biases exist, recognizing them in ourselves,
Yeah.
that's the first step.
So we can try to make more deliberate, informed choices instead of just being pushed around by impulses or emotions.
Precisely. Understanding these traps is empowering. It helps you take back control, navigate your financial life more effectively, and really work towards those long-term goals. It's about learning to spot these influences and actively counteracting them.
Okay, so as we wrap up, here's a final thought for everyone listening. Think about a specific financial decision you made recently. Could be big, could be small.
Mhm.
Looking back with all this stuff in mind, anchoring, loss aversion, availability, all of it, do you see any of those biases potentially playing a role in how you decided?
Good reflection exercise.
And knowing what you know now, is there anything you might do differently next time you're in a similar spot? It's all about that continuous process, right? Reflecting, learning, and getting better at managing the psychology of our own money.